My wife and I have long wanted to move away from the hustle and bustle of the city. The impetus for this was her pregnancy, because we wanted our child to grow up in the fresh air. Our choice fell on a small house outside the city. The price was quite attractive and, having drawn up all the documents, we moved to the new place in a few days. The house was not in the best condition, especially the floors. In the living room, they were literally falling apart from old age. I asked my wife to stay overnight at a friend's house and started replacing the old boards. It didn't make sense for her to stay in the house, she could hurt herself. I was very worried about her. While dismantling the boards, I found an old cassette tape under one of them in the corner. Forgetting about work, I put the cassette into the tape recorder. At first there was only crackling, sobbing, and confused breathing, but then I heard a voice. It was clearly a woman's voice, crying and laughing, and it was eerie.
If you're listening to this, I'm no longer alive because my life has become a living hell. I never thought something like this could happen to me. I didn't want it to. It all started about a week ago when I started having weird dreams. At first I was just seeing the whole room from upstairs, seeing me sleeping, seeing my little 5-year-old daughter Lilia sleeping, seeing our dog wandering around the house in the dark. It went on like this for a few days, and one day, as always, while watching me sleep, I noticed something in the corner. The room was pretty dark, but it was darker than any darkness, and, oh God, it was moving. It looked like some kind of animal, and I could clearly see 2 blood-red reflections. Apparently they were its eyes. I was in the living room, and the dog sleeping next to my daughter's crib suddenly perked up her ears and headed toward me. She started barking at the corner, and this something seemed to back off. I woke up and saw our desperately barking dog. At that moment, terror gripped me. Fear gripped my entire body, so realistic was the dream. I don't know how, but I was able to sleep that night. The next night I put my daughter to bed and lay down by myself. I saw myself again, but there was something in the corner again. It was slowly crawling towards me. I jumped out of bed and ran to my daughter. It was like a movie because I couldn't control my body. I woke up to the door slamming behind me. I was standing in Lily's room and she was sitting in her crib, looking at me fearfully and crying. After calming her down, I spent the rest of the night in the kitchen with the dog, thinking about what had happened. I had never sleepwalked before, and there was clearly something paranormal going on in the house. In the morning, I sent my daughter to her grandmother's house and started cleaning the house myself. I searched every corner of the house. Of course, I didn't find anything, and I was so tired that by evening I just collapsed on the bed without strength, without even undressing. At night I saw myself again. I really wanted to wake up, but I couldn't do it. The monster wasn't in his usual place. I breathed a sigh of relief, but suddenly I saw him. He crawled out from under my daughter's bed and slowly moved toward the hallway. The dog rushed to the defense with a bark. The poor thing tried to bite, but apparently could not even grab the creature. Meanwhile, the monster sort of sprawled and began to gather around the animal. The red eyes glared. There was a cry of despair and pain. I stood up and headed for the room. I couldn't control myself. My greatest fear was that it would do something to me. When I entered the room, the monster just vanished into thin air. Only my dog, my beloved, devoted dog that we had lived together for 9 years, lay with her throat slit, wheezing and twitching. I bent over her and cradled her to me. and in that instant, I woke up. We live in a secluded, almost forested area. But my scream must have woken up every living thing within a couple of miles. I had my dog in my arms, just like in the dream, with his throat ripped open. My hands were covered in blood, the floor was covered in blood, blood was everywhere. I shoved the corpse away and ran outside, sat there until morning. It was scary outside, but it was even scarier at home. I got home in the morning. I buried the dog in the woods, then mopped the floor and took a hot shower myself. I felt a little better. My mom called. I decided not to tell her anything. I just told her that I forgot to lock the door, and the dog had run away in the night. Lilia was very upset. Mom said she couldn't sit with her anymore, as she had to leave urgently on a business trip for work. I was terribly offended at her, but there was nothing to do. When I brought my daughter home, I realized I couldn't stay here. I packed my things and dragged Lilia, still mourning the dog, to the car. Everything should have been fine. I had just gotten in from the city after picking up my daughter, but now the car stubbornly wouldn't start. It wouldn't start. No way. I sent Lilia into the house so she wouldn't freak out, while I cried and kicked the car as hard as I could. It was evening. I was scared. I knew I wouldn't be able to sleep. All night, without turning off the light, I sat in Lily's room, over her crib, guarding her sleep. Everything was fine as long as I stayed awake. In the morning, I called my friend and asked her to pick us up. She agreed, but she never came, and I waited in vain for her all day. Evening came again. I was already exhausted. My daughter had already gone to bed, and I sat in the kitchen, emptying my third cup of coffee. I decided to read a book, but the lines were blurred and my head hurt. Suddenly I saw myself from the outside again. How could I have fallen asleep? How? He was crawling across the floor to my daughter's bed. His eyes were no longer little lights, they were glowing with the flames of hell. He crawled and tore at the floorboards with his claws. Yes, he killed her. He killed my daughter. She hardly suffered at all. The creature bit her throat and tore at her body with its claws for a long time. I watched the blood splatter on the wall. The beast growled and wheezed. It devoured my daughter greedily, with a cursed bestial appetite. Blood dripped from the crib as I slept. Drip, drip, drip. I can still hear that sound. When I woke up, I felt a copper taste in my mouth. I didn't want to open my eyes. I knew what I would see. But still, I made an effort. It was still dark. I was sitting on the crib next to what was left of my sweet Lilechka. I had her blood on me. Terrified, I jumped back and happened to see my reflection in the mirror. There are no words to describe it. It was horrible, even scarier than my mangled daughter. My hair was tangled and stained with blood. My face was covered in blood, too. Thin strands of blood were sticking out of my mouth. I thought I was going to throw up, and then I noticed my eyes. They were glowing red. I don't know why I'm sitting here writing all this, but I have to warn anyone who ever enters this house that this is no place to live. I hope I save someone's life because my life is over.
The recording ended. After that, I was in complete shock. Trying not to panic, I thought it over. Maybe it was just a bad joke. A really bad joke. As I carried the old boards out, I noticed scratches on them. I broke out in a sweat. It can't be true.
A week later, the small town was shocked by the news. A young man brutally murdered his wife and ate their unborn child, then fled the scene of the crime. He was never found.